We got everyone but Marcus.
Yep. All right, we are live streaming. There's somebody else coming in. Hold on. Oh, wait, maybe not.
All right, 6 o'clock. Let's get started. This is a City Council workshop meeting, Tuesday, March 2nd, via Zoom on a webinar. We are live streaming on YouTube and ready to go into the agenda. The Title 17 amendments to code enforcement process discussion with Russ Wright and Ryan Muma. Russ isn't here yet. Ryan, do you want to start?
Sure, if you're ready. Thank you, Council Member Daughtry. Good evening, Council members. Hopefully you've had a chance to review the information in the packet. Good evening, Mayor. Sorry, I didn't see you there. Hopefully you had a chance to review the information in the packet. I'm going to go ahead and go over a little presentation and some background on that. Should be pretty quick. And then if there are any questions, we can work through those at the end. Let me see. Not sure. How do I share from here, Kelly? Oh, there we go.
Yeah, should be that little arrow. Yep.
Okay.
You should have. Yep.
How's that?
Looks good, Ryan.
Okay, great. So after the last work session, I had a few questions and suggestions. So before we get into the code discussion, I thought it'd be a good idea to give a general overview. So in the presentation today, first we'll look at what is code enforcement and who does it. We'll also review some topics from the prior work session, explain why we're updating the code, and then look at some of the changes. So what is code enforcement? Code enforcement is a legal process that can be initiated for any violation of Lake Stevens Municipal Code. The majority of our violations are on residential property, and they involve things such as nuisance violations, junk vehicles, trash, dilapidated structures. It also involves land use violations like tree cutting or disturbances of critical areas, shorelines, slopes, things of that nature, and also zoning violations. Businesses rarely have violations that rise to the level of an enforcement case. So here's some examples of typical nuisance violations. We've got the junk vehicles and trash and debris around the house and other miscellaneous things stored in the garage there, or I'm sorry, in the driveway. Here's some examples of typical land use where we've got some tree cutting, or here we've got somebody that is digging through a wetland there for, it was actually a sewer connection, I think, that we were unaware of. And then some unpermitted uses. This is actually a business use that was staging equipment for their paving business on a vacant lot that was zoned single family. So those are some of the typical things we deal with. And the majority of our cases are resolved voluntarily without the need for fines or abatement, as in the case here. We gave them a reasonable amount of time, and fortunately they moved off. But unfortunately, resistance from the responsible party is always a significant factor in the speed of getting a case resolved. So I believe improving our provisions will strengthen the ability to compel them a little sooner. Another example of some successes, I think that, again, as you recall from last week's meeting, the reluctance of the responsible party is a significant factor. And on this one here, it actually took several contacts before we were able to get them clean it up. So yeah, I don't believe we ever recovered fines at this point. Those are in collections. But so anyway, who enforces the code? That's the code enforcement officer. Most violations are investigated and enforced by the code enforcement officer, who's a non-commissioned staff person under the planning department. It also includes support from our police partnership, as well as other departments like fire and public works. Some of the violations are enforced strictly by the police, such as illegal parking on the right of way, noise violation, things of that nature. And then building code violations, such as failed inspections or building without permits or beyond the scope of permitted work, those are enforced under the building code. We start with those provisions and then initiate enforcement under Title 17 if they're not corrected. So why are we updating the code? Well, general housekeeping, really, and we're actually retaining the majority of the existing code and performing reorganization and cleanup. We've also added some definitions and clarification to the process to really explicitly define how we move through it. And then there's some conflicts. As we discussed before, we have at least 3 different titles that reference enforcement with violation and penalties. For instance, garbage under Title 8, nuisances in Title 9, and then we've got land use requirements in Chapter 14 that reference enforcement through Title 17, which is the most recent title containing our voluntary compliance agreements and notices of violation that we primarily use now. So we're working to organize these provisions to remove those conflicts and duplications and then combining it for one enforcement path. That'll also create some consistency of enforcement by categorizing violations to assign a priority level and determine the type of response. And this will work to enhance our code to define the progression of enforcement, yet allow any method available appropriate to that violation. We'll also remove barriers that currently limit our enforcement actions or require numerous notices from the city. That's again some of those conflicts that are in Title 9. And then we'll update our procedure for legal notice to violators while still encouraging voluntary compliance as the preferred outcome. In difficult cases of non-compliance, it will reduce the number of notices that are needed before we proceed to advanced enforcement. And the updates will also allow for fines on a cumulative basis rather than issuing a notice every time we want to add an additional penalty for, again, cases where they don't comply, and we're trying to leverage that to get them to clean it up. So overall, we're refining our process of enforcement and still maintaining that focus on voluntary compliance. This will help us maximize the use of the resources we have now and attain compliance sooner. And again, while the speed does heavily rely on the cooperation of the violator, improving our effectiveness can help achieve better results. So where are we now? Current status. At this point, as you see, we provided chapters 1710 and 1720, or our proposed edits to that, which contain the general provisions, definitions, and overall enforcement actions. And we currently have a rough draft for the majority of the code and are working on additional language. Part of that is analyzing the current code to retain the effective parts of Title 17 and the other titles, and then reorganizing and combining the current code into one standalone title for enforcement of violations. At the same time, we'll supplement with new tools to add improvements in the noticing and enforcement progression, as I referred to earlier. And then we'll finalize the overall framework, including the naming and numbering, correcting references in the remaining existing chapters to reflect the new format. So that's briefly a quick run through. Going forward, staff will present additional sections of the proposed code in later work sessions, and ultimately we'll have one complete title to be presented for council review. That's all I have. I appreciate the opportunity and happy to answer any questions. How do I
Right. Are you ready for questions, Ryan?
I am, if I can get back to see everyone's faces, but I can still hear you. So,
Right.
oh, stop share. There we go.
There we go.
I'll fire away since everyone else is quiet here. Just a couple of things of clarification, and maybe I'll start out with a question first. In our present code situation, kind of an average, how long does it take to resolve a problem?
Well, on an average, I would say we're probably at least 2 to 3 weeks. I think that will definitely improve when we have a dedicated code enforcement officer. But honestly, I haven't run a report to give us an average time. And then of course, there's some where we're fortunate to get them resolved sooner, and then some that take longer. So I would guess at least 3 weeks. I don't know, for us, maybe you've got a better estimate on that.
Yeah, I'd say for your simple violations that someone was probably unaware, they're usually pretty motivated to get things corrected. If there's crossover with the police and they need to go out and ticket or tag different vehicles, they jump all over that. It's really the ones where we have obstinate or non-responsive violators that the cases really get dragged out, months, even years in some cases.
Yeah, and that's kind of the focus of these changes, is to get our arms around the ones that are not so cooperative, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, with that, just a couple of questions. On 1710-030, it talks about the director of any department of the city of Lake Stevens or designee has the authority to enforce any applicable provisions. Do so. So the public works director could enforce anything. The parks director could enforce anything. I guess we're striving towards a code enforcement officer, and so I guess, I mean, the director of any department of the city of Lake Stevens can enforce this.
That's carryover language from the existing code, and I think it could be a bit more specific that's applicable to their discipline. Because there are some times that in public works, it would be more appropriate for the public works director to have his designee, say, be the stormwater coordinator or something like that, that is the true expert, but it is going to be the intention, and you don't see this language yet, that comes in one of the follow-up chapters that does explicitly state that the code enforcement officer and the designee for the city will be this new position. And this just really is the emphasis that any director that sees a violation under their purview, they can initiate the violation and have staff working with the code officer to facilitate whatever solution is needed.
Okay. All right. Second question under 1710-080, definitions, down where item number 1, which is a subset of the code violation, says any act or omission contrary to any ordinance, resolution, la da 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 da. Whether or not the ordinance, resolution, or regulation is codified.
I do remember our discussion on that, Russ. I don't know, you may be able to explain it better, but I think that was standards, development standards, and other conditions of a permit, but you might want to weigh in a little more detail.
No, that's correct. This was language recommended by our attorney's office to cover other decisions that may be not codified, but are still conditions of a development or project approval.
So that whether or not the ordinance, resolution, is specifically to land development issues. Is that correct?
That's correct. It could be a business license, something like that. Most often, though, it would be tied to some sort of a prior land use or, say, platting approval if it held special conditions.
Okay. Okay. And then over on 1720-020, where you talk about procedures and guidelines for responding, I think it may, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it states on the last sentence that the city is not obligated to conduct any further inspection or investigation, nor to act regarding such complaint. Sometimes people make complaints and, they just kind of fall on deaf ears. It would be kind of nice if we maybe a courtesy letter, explaining or just briefly we're not responding to a particular situation because of, rather than just letting it die and not bringing some resolution to it. Just a suggestion. That's all I have. Thank you.
Along those lines, Gary, I would like to see, if there's not one in place, a systematic process, complaint flow for when a complaint comes in, how it's handled, who point of contact is, because I know far too often right now there is not a process in place for that, and it's not organized and systematic, and it can give the appearance of preferential treatment, and we don't want to, or difference, or whatever the case may be. We want to make sure that we're being thoughtful in how we carry out those complaints when they come in.
Agreed.
So what can we do? Yeah, what can we do with that, Russ or Ryan, to put something in place or to better organize something to make sure that we're systematic about what we're doing and approaching these complaints that come in?
There is an automated system and an online complaint portal. That's how we get the majority of our complaints, and then those go to the staff on Ryan's team that Ryan and me figure out, where the work goes, if it's PD's involvement, other departments. So there is a workflow. What's lacking, and we're hoping to build with more staff, is I think what Councilmember Peter Shagan was talking about, that every code violation or alleged violation does get a personal touch and some reaction back from the city or response in a more formal manner. As it is now, not saying it's good or bad, it isn't always prioritized with the other workloads, depending on the type of violation. So the added staff really helps us put an immediate resolution to all code violations instead of just trying to fit it into other duties.
And I actually have been working with Russ to kind of categorize not only the categories of response that are in 1720-010, but we're looking at the typical violations that we receive and then assigning them a priority level, and also what our typical response would be. What's the next action, and what sort of timelines are we given for that compliance, and also for our initial response. So I think taking your feedback as far as better communication with our customers and then developing a consistent approach would absolutely be helpful. And I know that we're working on an internal policy that I'm sure we would be happy to bring back and present our progress on that.
Yeah,
I would appreciate that too. I would appreciate that too. Sorry, Steve. I think
no worries, Mary. Thank
Steve
you.
and Gary are right on the money, and I think that would be helpful, so that the citizens feel like we're listening to them and responding. Appreciate that.
So if we do have a timeline for the high, moderate, and low risk, and just say, hey, within X number of days, whatever is going to do that. A lot of jobs and things have timelines on them, and they need extensions and such. And we don't want to be bureaucratic about it, but we also want to be responsive. Because I know of a code complaint right now that's pretty significant, and it's been ongoing for many months, and it's not getting the kind of attention that maybe you'd like. And so understanding that, I could see how someone would be frustrated, someone that's impacted by that violation, if there's not a timeline that they can reasonably expect something to have.
Absolutely.
Any other comments or questions for staff? Okay, seeing none. Good job, Ryan. I appreciate it. Let's move on to the next topic, which is a permissible use chapter revisions update discussion with David and Jill. David, go ahead and take it away, or Jill, doesn't matter. Jill.
Yeah, Jill's been the driving force behind this,
Okay.
so I'm going to go ahead and let her take the lead.
All right.
Good evening, everybody. We wanted to take some time to briefly update you all on our permissible use table amendment. Since we gave our last update in December, we've been working with the Planning Commission over the past 3 months on ways to consolidate uses, reduce and potentially eliminate redundant land use processes, and establish some more objective performance standards for some uses. At the last meeting in Planning Commission, we introduced 3 table drafts, which are attached as exhibits. They are the residential use table, the non-residential use table, and the special use table. Currently, all of our uses were in one giant table, but we're splitting it out into 3 different ones. These are just the skeleton versions to show the format, as we are currently working with the Planning Commission to fill them in. Back at the last meeting, I had mentioned that our new tables would be based on the North American Industrial Classification System, or the NAICS code for short, so that we can better integrate our table into our business license program. So you'll see that the NAICS codes are shown in the leftmost column of each of the tables, and then individual use classifications are also present next to the NAICS codes. We added a few zones, such as the commercial district, business district, and central business district, and those will run across the top of the table. So although the majority of these zones are located within the subareas and therefore beholden to the subarea chapters, there are a few parcels that exist in those zones but outside of that subarea. And then later this month at our March 17th meeting, we will be discussing utilizing performance standards to potentially eliminate conditional use permits or administrative conditional use permits where they are applicable, and instead installing some performance standards, which would be subject to an objective set of criteria to ensure that potential development is in harmony with the surrounding area. So we anticipate holding 2 more work sessions with the Planning Commission and 1 work session with Council before we move on to the public hearing phase, which is set to occur in May or June. So before we move on to questions, Russ or Dave, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think you did a thorough job. Only other comment I would make is it's really been the goal of staff as we've been able to modernize the code over the last few years. This is just sort of the next step to doing that, making it more user-friendly. That's been really the goal for us. And that's really been the feedback from the Planning Commission, that they're very supportive at this point of trying to do that. And again, the next phase is going away from conditional use permits when we can. There are going to be some cases where we can't, but go to something not as far as a form-based code that would allow, say, any use anywhere based on a set of criteria. It finds a middle ground that in appropriate locations, you would apply the performance standards, which would be things like, how do you ensure that there's compatibility, that there's not noise or lights or a variety of other things from, say, commercial uses that may impact an adjacent use, rather than going through an extended permit process with review by other bodies.
Are there any questions from the council? I'll let you know that I learned a new term today that I didn't, or yesterday, that I've never seen before. That's silviculture. I had to look it up. So I got to go to bed last night because I learned something new. So that was pretty nice. How many of you are trying to look it up right now?
I'm curious as to what that is.
It's let's see, what does it say? It says the growing and cultivation of trees.
Growing trees, Christmas tree farms.
Never heard that term before. So Jill, good job. Looks like you've been working hard on this one. Anybody else have? That's it for our agenda today. Mr. Mayor, you have anything to talk about?
I do not have anything to talk about.
Does anybody else on the council have anything they wish to address?
It looks
Dean
like,
has his hand up.
yeah.
You know, I was kind of curious as how Aquafest was coming along. I'm starting to get a lot of people asking about Aquafest, and I mentioned to Kim Daughtry, council member Kim Daughtry, already that I might have a fun thing for. There is maybe some things. I hope we can find a way and a path forward for Aquafest this year. It might be really fun, and probably bring 250 people to Lake Stevens for Aquafest. So just hoping that maybe we can find a path forward for Aquafest this year. Very exciting. And I know everyone missed it so much last year. And by the way, it was my 30th class year reunion last year. So they're looking forward to this year. So there's maybe a little bit more behind the scenes there with me. So.
Well, we are working on Aquafest, not as hard as we usually work on it because everybody's still kind of gun shy about saying, yes, we're going to have Aquafest. We are going at it as if we're going to have it. But in May, what we will have to have a drop dead date because there's some things we got to pay for and get people lined up for, and past May is just too late. So we're going to have to know something by the end of May. Because then it's, 2 months later and that's it. So anyway, I hope it goes forward too. I missed it last year. Of course, I got 2 years to rest up that for this one, so that'll be good.
I will say there's people out there that have shirts every single year from Aquafest. Just saying. So yep. It might be that you do a 2020/21 Aquafest t-shirt. If you're thinking about it, because I know a friend of mine, Lori Larson, has a shirt, her and Jan, I think from every year. So I'd hate to see them miss a year on something like that. They've talked about it already. But
yeah, I was thinking about having one that had Aquafest 2020 with a slash to it 2021. Or something similar to that. You're muted, Marcus.
That would be really nice for them to be able to explain the gap in the not having t-shirts and stuff. I think there's a lot of people out there like them that have the shirts every year, but it's a great thing for the community and a lot of fun stuff going on that week for us. So I was just curious where we're going. So
and downtown's going to be totally different too. I mean, we're probably going to have, from what I understand, the museum and the library will be gone. The Grimm House will be moved. The row house is going to be moved. Hopefully, it's just going to be gravel like it was the last time, just before we built the mill. So it's going to be a different way. And then in going forward from there, if we do have somebody building a building right there, we're going to lose a little bit of room for Aquafest the way it's always been. The carnival being in the boat launch area, that's going to have to move because that won't be available anymore, won't be sizable enough. So there's going to be massive changes coming to Aquafest, but they're all good as far as I'm concerned. There's, we need to change some things up and find some different things to do. The circus, Bernardo's Circus has already contacted me. They contacted me last Friday, said they really want to come to Lake Stevens. They're trying their best to do some things. They're going to be in Tacoma the 2 weeks before that. They've already planned to move. I don't know if you all know this, but they're out of Florida, but they come to the Pacific Northwest for their summer, and so they're really interested in being here. So I told them, hey, I just don't know what to tell you yet. So because we just don't know, but they want to be here. Haven't talked to the carnival yet. Trying to figure out who they are because our longtime carnival is not coming to Washington anymore. So they've turned us on to another carnival that we were going to have last year. Of course, everybody knows that didn't happen. So there's some new ideas out there. Marcus, thanks for yours. I look forward to working with that one. That'll be kind of cool. I can't wait to see that, if we can make that happen. I don't see why we can't. And if anybody else has some ideas for changing things in Aquafest, we'd be more than happy to have you as part of the board and get it going.
Kim, how tall do you have to be to ride the rides, out of curiosity?
Taller than me. I can't believe they wouldn't let me on that ride. That was crazy. Anyway, anybody else have anything they want to discuss about anything? Oh, hey, Gene, I lost you there. I couldn't see you down the corridor in the airport there.
No problem. A couple of weeks ago, I had a council member ask about
Yeah, no
our
worries.
approval process through the attorney's
Fingers
office.
crossed. I'm hoping for
And
good,
it brought up a good
response
point
tomorrow,
that
but I'll be
council,
online
unless
at
you
8 and
ask,
we'll
really don't
see what it
know
goes
if
like,
things
but I'll
go
keep
through
you
the
posted.
attorney's
I'm sure
office.
there's gonna
So
be more
you'll see on
from the
future
Freedom Saga, so-
staff reports, we're going to put a box in there where it'll be checked whether it's been reviewed or reviewed prior, because we use a lot of templates through our attorney's office. We
All right.
don't recreate the wheel. So that's forthcoming. We talked about logistically how that'll work this morning. So I just wanted to follow up on that so council knows that that's
Yeah,
coming down the
absolutely.
pipeline.
Cool.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I gotta run, but I will.
Anything else?
So just, you know, I was thinking of a couple things. We're actually, Nick
Nope,
is.
too late. You were already on. Sorry.
Should have never said anything. I should
I
have
know.
never said anything.
I know.
Go ahead, Brett.
So just thinking about downtown, the row house is getting prepped for movement. Nick is welding some things together and putting it on wheels, and then that will get moved on Monday. So if you want to come down and watch, could be could be fun.
It's actually Tuesday now, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, is it Tuesday? Okay.
Tuesday. Yeah, Nick's off on Monday.
Okay, so we're moving that on Tuesday. So come on down and should be fun. And
What time are you gonna start that circus?
do you know, Gene? I'm gonna assume in the morning.
No time yet,
No time. Okay.
but I can text you guys.
Can you send out an email to the council when it's going to happen? So if we do want to be down there, we can.
Certainly.
Thank you.
And then Gene, what day were we doing the facade in case any of the council members want to come down and help?
We will pin down a date. We got to make sure that we can get all the material ordered. They're especially tall studs to build that wall. So once we get the logistics figured out, I will let people know.
Okay. So just so council members know, we're going to build a facade on the front of the row club, and we'll just probably use council member labor and time to do that because it's not in the budget. So if you want to come on down and help out with big studs, come on down. Or bring big studs with you, whatever you want to do.
Let me know the time and date.
Yeah, I'll be there. Okay. Anything else? It's only been 32 minutes. We got to have something else. Come on now.
No, we don't.
All right.
No movement to adjourn. We're done.
Well, we don't need to move that. We're done.
All right.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see y'all later.